New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And good morning, dear ones. Dr. Robert with you here. It's a Saturday morning. It's 9 a.m. on the Mountain Time Zone. And that means it is time for our Saturday Science of Mind and Spirit conversations. Those that have been around this program know that every Saturday morning we gather to discuss the writings of Ernest Holmes and have a conversation. So I want you to know you are more than welcome to chime along, chat along, let us know where you're from, interact throughout the program. If appropriate, I will absolutely include that. So a couple of hellos to get started. Good morning, Linda. Thank you. Welcome back. I was in the Affiliated New Thought Network's annual summer retreat, which, yes, it's October, so we're going to drop the word annual. And just got home late last night, so getting ready this morning for this. Hey, Wayne, good to see you, dear one. Grateful you are with us. Thank you. Shea Bird, thank you for being with us. Good to see you. Appreciate the congratulations. While I was away this week, I was conferred as a Doctorate of Divinity. The official ceremony and all that happened, and it was beautiful and fun. Roy Chavez, all the way from Fort Morgan. Good morning, dear sir. Grateful that you are with us as well. And if you don't feel like chiming along or chatting along, that's fine too. Welcome to you all that wish to remain anonymous out there. So I thank you for being with us. And I wanted to say a quick thank you to this team, because what I know is the team that puts this together each and every week is doing an amazing job. And again, for those that might be here for the very first time, in the first half or so of the year, we study the Science of Mind textbook. In the second half of the year, we dig into and support the Science of Mind archives. So all of our resource today actually comes from the Science of Mind archives. We get to look at some of the older things that are happening, some of the things that have been around. We want to say, number one, thank you to the archives for sharing their resources with us and allowing us to share some of those with you here. And over the last few months, because one of our team members, the Reverend Mark Gilbert, wrote a book about Ernest Holmes at Asilomar, and he tracked down a whole bunch of the transcripts from Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. And so today, in honor of all that, we are looking at a transcript of a talk that is available now in two different ways. It's available in the book. It's in this book, but it's also available on page 172 of the book. This talk was originally given in 1957. You're going to hear some references in the talk to other pieces of that week and such. And this is available on the archives. I'm going to drop a link in the uh, chat box. It should come through to you. If not, I'm so sorry. Facebook works in weird ways, but it is available on the Science of Mind archives shop. So this is a talk given by Ernest Adesilomar. My intention this morning is I want to just read through this and allow you to kind of sink into all of it. I may break in for a little bit of commentary here and there, but more than anything, what I encourage you to do is drop your questions or any comments in the chat box as I go, and and then we'll discuss those following my reading of this. So there are a few things we're going to leave out that are notes that have been added, such as this second paragraph here, and some of these things are not in the printed book. Again, this is an older PDF version of what we knew about this talk at the time. We now have a greater understanding of this talk too. So let's get right on into it. 1957. Our teaching has a very great deal of mysticism in it, and it should be completely developed with the realization that mysticism is not mystery, just as intuition is not psychism. Half of the world and three-quarters of the world in our field who should know better mistake intuition for psychism and think if a person gets a hunch, they must be very spiritual. So most people mistake mysticism for mystery. Mysticism is not mystery, and psychism is not intuition, although many people in our field mistake these. Just as Buck said that cosmic consciousness is an awareness of our union with the whole and the unity of the whole, so mysticism is the perception of that wholeness in everything without fragments. When we use reason without fragments, we would very closely approach the axiomatic reasoning of the individuality of the unit, because there is nothing unlike it with which to divide itself. And that which remains indivisible has to be a total unit. And being a unit and indivisible, that is what they call the perception of omnipresence. Let's get this clearly in mind. Mysticism is not mystery. Intuition is not psychism. Cosmic consciousness is some degree of a perception of the unity of the whole, the indivisible unity, and it means the unity. Mysticism is the perception of the whole in everything, and in none of these perceptions is there any degree of division at all. What I said about forgiveness is true. I didn't make it up. It's not only one of the true precepts of the ages and mystical and intuitive perceptions of Jesus, because it was true, but is now verified in modern science, and we find them doing this. Emerson said, when in life, what is our life but an endless flight of winged facts or events in splendid variety? These changes come, all putting questions to the human spirit. Those men or women who cannot answer by a superior wisdom these facts or these questions of time serve them. This is the very great saying. The Bible puts it another way. It says, we are the servant of the thing we obey. Emerson said, we see what we animate and we animate what we see. Mrs. Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy, said, mortal mind sees what it believes as truly as it believes what it sees. This is one of the great wisdoms of Emerson, because he perceived only one mind. When he says these men who cannot answer by a superior wisdom will serve what is back of why Jesus forgave people their sins. You see, we teach a law of cause and effect, which itself is an effect of a previous cause, which has no cause, and it itself is not an effect. Therefore, all sequences of cause and effect are comprehended within it. Now, we definitely teach in our teaching cause and effect, and anyone who thinks they're going to get away from cause and effect, thinks you are going to get away, or thinks you are going to get away from cause and effect. You are going to get away from it, but you cannot merely create a new sequence of cause and effect. If you passed into what the absolutists think in an absolute state of being, you wouldn't be anywhere at all. You wouldn't be, and if God still is you, wouldn't know it. So far as you were concerned, there would be nothing to God to know that is God. I personally do not believe that there is any abstraction in the universe. If there were, we would never perceive it because our perception would be the consecration of that abstraction. It's unthinkable to me that there would be an intelligence that knows anything outside of, different or otherwise, than itself. In a continuum wherein eternal change takes place is a play of life upon itself, but nothing is being accomplished as purpose. Does that seem strange to you? Dean Ing says an infinite purpose is a logical mathematical contradiction. And the reason for that is that you cannot have an infinite incompletion. It would break up. Now, Emerson said, a mind might ponder its thought for ages and not gain so much self knowledge as the passion of love shall teach in one day. Isn't that an interesting thing? He places love above the intellect, and yet he was the most intelligent man America has ever produced. Emerson. I'm skipping around. I like this. Humanity is our own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man demands all light, all influence, all faith. Nothing to him falls too early or too late. Our angels are good or ill or fatal shadows that walk by us still. And the next one casts the battling of the rock, suckles him with the she-wolf's teats, wintering with the wind and fox power and speed by hands and feet. You see, Emerson said all instructions are but length and shadows of a man's mind, and a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmaments of the bards and the sages. Now, I believe that the great are great to us only because we are on our knees. We are on our knees, let us arise. But we must remember this also, that greatness will not die with us. It has a way of surviving after our ego has shuffled off this mortal coil and can no longer be found dead or alive. We must create a new form of mysticism in our movement. We can study as these are four classic examples, and there are no better than I know of, particularly Emma Curtis Hopkins and Eckhart. I think Eckhart is the greatest example of a delicacy of free feeling and touch in mysticism, a very great beauty. But I think the most robust form of mysticism that I know anything about is Walt Whitman. It is just a robust thing, because while Eckhart deals with it very gently, the same thing Whitman just grabs a piece of cosmos and throws it at you and you can't dodge it. And if you pass through it successfully without getting knocked out, you will know what he is talking about. Otherwise, his language will seem crazy. So will Ms. Hopkins, unless you know what she is talking about. I took her course and it was a great privilege. One of the things Carl Jung said to Bill Hornaday, Bill had the experience of 49 interviews with him, and it's almost impossible for anyone to get anywhere near where he lives. But because Dr. Keller, who has been a lifelong friend of Schweitzer's and of Jung's and of Dr. Omar Freed, he had a chance to go down and study with Schweitzer for 3 months because of the same man. Jung said to Bill, you tell whoever this fellow is who started this thing that no religion can be a success without a very great degree of mysticism. Isn't that interesting? He said it is impossible that it is a feeling you see towards the invisible. How many of you have read Alan Watts' little book, Behold the Spirit, where he says, unless mysticism comes into the Christian religion, it will fold. I mean, we think it is here to stay, but it has only been around about 2,000 years, and that would be just before breakfast to some of the religions. So Emerson says imitation is suicide, envy is ignorance. Through the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to one, but through his toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. I believe we not only need to have a degree of mysticism come into our work, but I think it has to be a mysticism connected with the earth. It's an important line there. It is nice for us to soar in heaven and let down a few thunderbolts if we feel mean, and a few blessings if we think God has his hand on us, but that won't do it. Everyone comes original and alone to humanity from the alone and original within his own divinity. And he cannot help it that this is the way he is made. And it is only then as he reveals that things, but here again, we must be careful that mysticism isn't mystery and institution, isn't psychism, because here is a field of greater illusion and people speak with madness. We must have the intelligence to discriminate between the two as it is in Revelations, talking about the book of Revelations. I thought when I listened to Billy Graham last Saturday night, that is a sweet guy. And I thought that he is a sweet, wonderful, absolute, sincere guy. And I'm sure he is doing good. Then I got to thinking it over the next day, and I still thought he was sweet and all that. Then I thought, let's approach this from the non-committal viewpoint, without prejudice, for or against, or emotion, but just thinking he's a sweet guy, which he is. And let's forget all that, and not from a non-critical viewpoint, because you might not happen to believe it. Let's see what is under analysis. And do you know what my analysis was? That the greatest spiritual stupidity can be exhibited by man, and the highest form of intelligent and intellectual arrogance that can be entertained by man is for anybody, sincere or insincere, to believe anybody else is going to place less good than he. There is no greater intellectual arrogance or spiritual stupidity than this conceit that is conceivable, because it deals with eternity. If it only dealt with you falling down and breaking an arm today, that would be a passing event. But when it deals with the eternal verities that no greater stupidity, no greater harm can come to the mind of man. Now, Emerson was free from this. He was so free, he said, why drag the dead corpse of the Sunday school across your church? Trust thyself, every heart vibrates to that iron string. He says so much that is beyond belief. He says, but the man is, as it were. He doesn't have a genuine independence, but the man is, as it were, trapped in a jail by his own consciousness. Hear the voices we hear in solitude, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world. He also said it is enough to do this in the silence when we are alone, but a great man is he who can help keep with perfect sweetness and independence or simplicity of his solitude. Our religion is a mystical religion, but it is not a religion away from the earth. It is a religion where the grass grows, a religion that no longer separates physical, mental, and spiritual, but finds action and reaction, an actor, one and all the same, that all the same thing, and here and now. This state of mystical concept to be delivered to whomever comes to us cannot be delivered except by a non-meanly critical mind. It is absolutely impossible that heavenly discourse shall be spoken by confused people or fools or ignorance. It just can't be done. This kind of a discourse, now remember, this is what the world is looking for. I recently spoke to two ministers, one a Methodist and the other a Congregationalist, who speak to such as we. They had just been going to conventions or whatever they have, like we are having here. And I said to them, how do you like it? And they said it was the most boring thing they ever attended. The people are nice, but it's all business, all routine. It is how do you do it? How do you do this or cover that? How to make a pillar for the things, no mysticism, no news from heaven. We were not liable to bring as much news from heaven as we might either. And the only reason is that we can only bring news from our own consciousness. Absolutely impossible. I don't care how much we strain or how much we know or how many answers we know. In such degree as you and I see something outside of that, which is the thing we ought to be looking for in and at each other, we can have no heavenly discourse. We're dumb. Well, Quimby says, I'm taking this question and answers and somewhat from the world of the senses and Christ or science, because it is from these three sections that the modern metaphysical movement came. Whether they call themselves New Thought or Christian Science, it says when you have arrived at truth, if you find it attached to a belief, you may know it is not a truth, for it may change. God is truth, and there is no other truth. Man's God is all the time listening to his prayers and setting off all sights of trouble. My God does not act at all. He has finished his work and leaves man to work out his happiness according to his own wisdom. Quimby was not familiar, so far as I know, with the teachings of ancient India. Troward most certainly was, in my estimation. I read books on India and Aurobindo particularly. Troward didn't get his system from Aurobindo, but he did get it from where Aurobindo got his, because they are too similar to doubt it. Aurobindo's Gnostic Man, in his section of the Divine Life, is an elaboration on Troward's denouement, or the creative process. In the creative process in the individual, of course, Troward was written before. Sorry, um, he got his because they're too similar to doubt it. Aurobindo's Gnostic Man, in his section of the Divine Life, is an elaboration on Troward's denouement of the creative process in the creative process in the individual. Of course, Troward's was written before Aurobindo's, but it shows they both came from the same source, that is all. We don't care where it came from, that is where Troward got it. I don't think anybody ever taught Quimby. There is a question whether he may have known something of Swedenborg in the laws of correspondence. I don't know. He says, my God has done everything. There's no difference. This is no different from Dean Ing teaching that the process of involution, the clod, is impregnated with the spark. Browning refers to it as a spark disturbs our clod. And that is what Troward is talking about in the involuntary process, or the passing, he called it, of spirit into matter, that matter may pass into form. It's very interesting that this guy worked out a universal matter too, where he said spirit is in matter in solution and mind is matter in form. But he said the two of them, as though it is a dual aspect, where the spirit of matter. I mean, we're the matter of spirit. I don't see any difference there. And Einstein saying energy is equal, identical, and interchangeable. But if energy itself is equal, energy and mass are equal, identical, and interchangeable, what is going to change them other than that which is neither energy or mass, but to which they, as energy and mass, being equal, identical, and interchangeable, are as the matter of that which principle which is superior to them. That was the position Quimby took on mind and matter, and what he called intelligence. So, like the ancient Hindus, his God did not evolve or change, but there was that thing which they called, Troward deals with it in the first chapter of Bible Mystery and Meaning, there was that thing they called the involuntary process, because the they called the involutionary process, because involution precedes evolution and is a spontaneous thing. Evolution follows involution with mathematical precision and is a mechanical thing. That is why we say, and rightly, that I believe this, and when given a treatment, I think our words fall into a mechanical medium, and reacts, but I don't think it knows it is reacting. It knows how to react, but if it knew it was reacting, it might say it didn't want to do it. In other words, we believe in a presence and a principle. I think that the metaphysical field, where they believe in a principle without a presence, something freezes up inside. Jesus came into the world not to give an opinion, but bring light into the world upon something that was in the dark. In the spiritual world, there are things, as there are in the natural world, that affect us as much, but these are not known by the natural senses or wisdom. And he is referring to both a psychic thing and what he calls spiritual intuition. He says the spiritual senses have their spiritual world with all the inventions of the natural world, but the relationship is not admitted to a natural man except as a mystery. There is just as much progress in the spiritual as in the natural world, and the science I teach is the wisdom of my God applied to the senses in the spiritual world. Wisdom is always the same. It is the point of all attraction, and everything must come to be in harmony. And this is the Christ. Now, the whole theory of Quimby. I don't want to go into all that, but just this idea of his mystical concept of the thing, because Quimby had what he called a spiritual clairvoyance. I think he had a clairvoyance beyond the average. Like Eileen Garrett. She wrote me a very powerful letter the other day. She said, I have had experiences occasionally like looking through a tunnel, and it seemed to be all full of clouds. Sometimes the clouds are very black, and sometimes they're almost white. When they clear up at the other end of the tunnel, you see something. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me again. As Eileen Garrett wrote, I've had an experiences occasionally, like looking through a tunnel, and it seems to be all full of clouds. Sometimes the clouds are very black, and sometimes they're almost white. When they clear up at the other end of the tunnel, you see something, and if you ever do, something happens. I don't know what it means, but I do believe you merely go through a tunnel at the spiritual world. I'm not talking about the psychic world or the spirit of little Annie Rooney. That is different. Annie may be there, but I'm not talking about something else. I'm talking about the medium, if she is there, in which she lives, the originator, and I suppose the archetypal patterns and concepts. You see, in our field, we don't understand these things, but we should feel them. We should sense their importance, and we should feel their presence, because as I've said, how can we project what we do not have? And what is everything we think about? Everything other than a projection. Because even though, as in the Zen Buddhists say, you first say everything is real out here, then you get into their philosophy and say the mountain is no longer a mountain. There is no such thing as a mountain. It is an illusion. But after a while, the mountain comes back. It is there. What you thought of it, it is gone. But the mountain remains, and it isn't an illusion. And Kant said we are able to perceive what seems to be eternal because it awakens an intuition within us in the medium of a common denominator. We would say it this way: God is in you. God is in me. God is in you. God is you. God is what I am. God in me sees God in you. God in you knows God in me. This way is the way we know things we could not know about each other. If there were not the medium of this common denominator, in other words, there is only one mind in the universe. Everything individuates from the mind. Nothing is individual to or in the mind. If we were to suppose something individual in the mind, it would be separate or isolated and could have no existence. And if it were, it could have no substance on that which exists. Physically and psychologically, we subsist on that which exists. Existence is the biggest word in our language. It means to suppose there is that which wasn't made and didn't make itself and just is and continues forever, but is always active. Now, it is the perception of our true spiritual awareness of the reality of things that gives power to our work, because all the words in the world without meaning wouldn't do anything. We would just be talking to ourselves. This has to come into our work more and more. Another thing, I chose four things for two reasons, and that is this: as our movement evolves and it develops, as it grows, which I think it will, and I don't know, I'm not a prophet. I know it doesn't destroy itself inwardly, and I have no guarantee that it won't because of the stupidity of all of us, including myself. It would become the next great religion's impulsion, since Mohammedanism. I don't class Christian Science or Mormonism as successful, as they are not big religions. They're not great religions. They're not lasting religions. There's too much in them that contradicts itself. Mormonism has more of the emotional appeal than the other ones, because you can baptize people after they have shuffled off this moral coil, and it still reaches them wherever they are and wets them down good, but that doesn't make any sense. There is very little emotional appeal in Christian Science. Nothing can exist without the emotional appeal backed by enough reality so that even though it does not interpret it rightly, it still interprets it, even though imperfectly. Behind everything has to be the prototype being revealed, or nothing is revealed. Now, that is the strength of every religion, and it is why it is the mystical element in religion that enables it to survive, because religion is an intuition. Mysticism is an intuition, an inherent awareness without going through processes. What I wanted to say was, it is hope, and it is only my hope. It would be my hope, I think, that unlike other religions, which have come upon the scene very often, I will say, almost back to ancient Hinduism. We have no prophets, you know. I make the poorest prophet that ever lived. I don't fast, I don't feast, I don't even practice yogi. I'm too lazy. Whatever shall come to me, it is only my system. Whatever is going to come to me is going to come to me while I'm walking down the street. It may take longer to evolve that way, but too often the often who break through a hedge is stung by a serpent. As Emerson said, when the fruit is ripe, it will fall. Nothing should be practiced to the exclusion of something else. God's system is inclusive, not exclusive. The biggest life is the one that includes the most, not the least. Who shuts out too much shuts in too little. Now, it is hoped that our religion, if it goes on and becomes a great religion, it is a great religion, the greatest the world has ever known. If we haven't, then the world hasn't known what makes a great religion. If you were to take the 10 greatest songs that were ever sung, you would have an album of the best songs ever written, wouldn't you? But why shouldn't someone else sing another one? Therefore, we must not shut out the possibility of a future. I think the great and vast literature will grow up around our work, but I hope it won't be repetitious of the few stupid things I have said. That would be bad. We do not have a lot of echoes. If I pass on tonight the church, they should do it now, but I wouldn't let them. I haven't any power to stop them. It would not be by mortal but immortal persuasion that I do it. If I pass on tonight, they can take everything I ever wrote and throw it in a trash can, and it is going to be thrown there someday anyway. But two things will remain, and only two, and whatever goes with them, there is a presence in the universe and a power in the universe, and they are not the same thing identically. They constitute a dual unity, the action and reaction, and polarity from which all things come, everything. and to which there is no hard or easy, no big or little that can never change in religious science. But the way that it is said can. Now, we ought to develop many people who know how to say it so well and write it so well that a great literature would grow up around our movement, making it more universal. Now, what is our difficulty? I'm going to tell you because you are ministers, and I'll be frank, and this is a clinic. We have to develop this, but there are two things that must be avoided in our talks, in our teachings, and in our writings. One is the unconscious arrogance of the ego that is projecting itself in the name of God with the belief that it has some peculiar dedication that other people do not have. This is stupid, just plain downright stupidity. And it is arrogant and ignorant, but it is one of the tricks the mind plays. It's called a projection in psychology. It is an unconscious defense mechanism. It is an inferiority complex manifesting its inadequacies to compensate for the fear of its own confusion and rejection. The other is just downright psychic confusion. All of us have got hold of these things, remember. I have them both, and that is what I know about them. I don't know anything about you other than what I project into you and about myself. So I am analyzing myself to you. And then you analyze yourself to me, and I would say it would be pretty identical and accurate if you're honest. We're honest the moment we are not condemning ourselves or anyone else, then we can be honest with ourselves for the first time. There's nothing wrong with that kind of honesty. Now, if we can do that, we ought to develop a vast amount of literature, which is the most dangerous thing in the world. The reason I would not like to see it done is that I don't want to shuffle off, and I would rest easy in my grave. Rest uneasy in my grave. I should come back and haunt somebody if that can be done, if anything ever grew up around what I have just said. Everyone is human and would like to feel they have written something that would last. But the truth will not change. This is very important to me. The last word has not been said. You are not going on my revelation. I am not a prophet. I have no revelations, and if I had them, I would mistrust them. And it might be hallucinations, and don't you trust any of yours. And never let our movement get into that static position and intellectually and the dearth of spiritual growth where it thinks everything has been said. And remember this, you teachers and preachers, there is nothing in our movement that restricts anybody. There is nothing in our movement that hamstrings anybody. If they think it is their own stupidity. There is nothing in our movement that is trying to promote anybody. Our movement is the most democratic spiritual movement in the world today. And if you don't know it, it is because you are ignorant of this fact. I no longer have any hesitation to say these things because I don't care what happens. If it becomes a movement, grand. If it doesn't belong to history. I comment now impersonally. This is true. We are the most independent spiritual organization the world has ever known. Now let us live up to our independence. Let's not take a power and a privilege or liberty to destroy freedom or spiritual insight to stupidity, to stupidly hamstring that which we are trying to do, and let us see it if it is possible. Now remember, these things don't happen very often in history. We're either a thing of destiny, which the tide of evolution has cast upon the shores of time, that will climb up off the shores and took root, as Emerson meant when he said a tree starts in a sand dune and gets a little growth, and by shedding its own leaves creates the soil from which it is to grow more. Emerson said the tree takes root in the sand where there is nothing to nurture it, and after a year it sheds its own leaves and in that way creates its own soil in which it will grow. He likes the things always, he likens the things always to the thing itself. Cast the battling on the rock suckle him with the she wolf's teeth, withering with the wind, fox power and speed by hands and feet. Poetic way of saying the same thing. Now, let us then do this same thing in our own movement. Let us have our freedom, but not destroy it. Let us see if that be the will of whatever is good, working out whatever destiny may be. If it be the operation of such revelation of inspiration or intuition that we have, let us see to it that those who start this thing and give birth to it, that no new bondage shall grow out of a greater freedom, that somehow or other in the evolution of this movement, those things which restrict shall pass away, but with the passing of the restrictions, there shall not come confusion, but somewhere in the spiritual evolution of the human race, there might have arrived, or there could arrive, or there ought to arise some group of people in the spiritual field who will have enough mutual respect and admiration for each other to cooperate. And as Browning said, with God be the rest. Wow. During my time this week at the affiliated New Thought Networks retreat, we heard some amazing speakers, and and the name just ran right out of my head. It'll come back in a minute. But one of the things we said, one of the things we heard, and one of the things that was said was that as a movement, New Thought has shied away from being very clear and very direct in saying, I am God, and letting it be known that each and every one of us, not I am a child of, not that I am an expression of, but to say it straight up. Everyone. I know Dr. James, Reverend Dr. James, and his last name has run right out of my head this morning. I apologize. Questions, comments? Let us know. Do Ernest's words still hold up? And I tell you, there's some things in here that, whoops, I lost it. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Oh, come back, come back. There it is. Um, there is nothing in our movement that restricts anybody. There is nothing in our movement that hamstrings anybody. If they think there is, it is their own stupidity. There is nothing in our movement that is trying to promote anybody. Now, that may harken back to an older perspective. But what I also believe is that in that older perspective, we find the truth and the roots of who we are becoming today. I wanted to read through this today and not get lost in the analysis of it. Because what I believe we were just told very, very clearly is that we each must come to this in our own way. We must each embrace these greater truths through our own words and through our own way. And so, yes, reading home seems antithetical to that idea. But mysticism is not a mystery. Anyone may live that may listen and can live in close context with that indwelling spirit is a mystic. Roy Chavez is saying, it's easy for me to say I'm an expression of God because it's part of my Navajo Native American theology. Yes, absolutely, Roy. Very, very similar. And I'm going to encourage you to take that to the next step and let people know I am God. We are each that. Not one of us more than the other. Not one of us less than the other. Linda's reminding us that the book is Stranger in a Strange Land on the banned book list. I don't know. Uh, I don't look at lists of banned books. To be straight up with you, Linda, I don't take any concern with what other people say should be banned. I take only concern with what is supporting the mission and my mission in my life, and being a better expression of God, a better God, if you will, to those around me. But in that book, she's I am God, thou art God, from Stranger in a Strange Land. And yes, absolutely the truth. I am God, thy art God. We must each remember that truth. Mellon, Reverend Dr. James Mellon, thank you. Thank you, Spirit, for the reminder. uh, when we have a chance to do the post production on that talk, I'll share it with all of you, and remind each of you are God. And being a mystic just means that we have accepted that truth and we live in a close indwelling presence with the divine. We live in that place where we hear truth and we know truth when we hear it. Reading Holmes takes time. And I think in both his talks and in his edited writings, in so much of the material that he put out, we have to read into it. We have to read between the lines. We have to read through around the corner sometimes. But I wanted to give you, I hope, at least a little bit of a sense of what it may have been like to sit at his feet and listen to what he speaks, what he spoke. Again, these, and this is only lesson one. In 1957, I want to come back to this. In 1957, there were 5 classes on mysticism, and they're all in this book. They're not all transcribed as PDFs on Science Mind website. The first one is class one, and this was what was considered the first of 5 class lectures, workshop lectures, specifically at that time for ministers. Yes, Linda, he does have a sense to pack a lot into each sentence. And a la Troward, if you've read Troward, Dr. Thomas Troward's work, he packs a lot into one sentence, and that one sentence can sometimes be a page or two long. So makes it a little more difficult to just read it out. However, point being, you have within you everything to practice mysticism, to be a mystic, to be a vessel through which you reveal your God self, and where you can discern an intuitive sense, an intuitive life. Mysticism is not a mystery, intuition is not psychism. Mystics are intuitives. I want to thank you for being with me this morning. Yes, Linda. Yes, yes, yes. Barry's asking, how can I get the physical book? Barry, you can head on over to Science of Mind Archives and or Amazon, and the title is Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. But I would suggest to head over to the uh, whoops, um, head over to the archives, and there is actually, I might just be able to get you a quick link right now as we go. Thank you, Shay. Yes, you are a mystic. Here it is. And there is a link to purchase the book in the comments as well. All right, I am Dr. Robert Brzezinski. I am so grateful to be with you as the founding visionary and spiritual director, creative director of New Thought Media Network. It's always a pleasure to be with you and invite you to come be a part of what we're doing and be a part of who we are in the world. With that, I do want to say thank you to our donors and sponsors, and I invite you to stick around for one more minute and help me do that. Please don't go away. Help me say thank you to our organizational sponsors and individual donors. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Home Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our individual sponsor donors and organizational sponsors. If you'd like to get your name on our video, by all means, head on over to the website, ntmedia.org, click on the donate button, and make a monthly donation. We'll add you to the next version of our thank you video. I want to finally just say thanks for everybody for being with me this morning. We'll be back again next Saturday morning with more of the Saturday Morning Science of Mind and Spirit Conversation series. Until then, I wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.